After my hip surgery, I needed help getting to the bathroom. My daughter's husband said, "I'm not wiping your A. This isn't a nursing home." She just said, "He's not wrong." I crawled. The next morning, I called someone I swore I'd never speak to again, and what happened next blew their lives apart. I'm 67. I live alone in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. I'm not rich, but I've made it work since the divorce. I worked as a school secretary for 31 years. Raised Natalie by myself after her father left. Sacrificed everything to get her through NYU. Never asked for a damn thing in return. When I needed a hip replacement, she offered to have me recover at her place in Jersey City. She said, "You shouldn't be alone after surgery." I believed her. I thought I raised a kind woman. I thought I mattered. The surgery was worse than I expected. I was in a lot of pain, couldn't move without help. It was hard to sit up, stand, get to the bathroom. Everything took effort. They gave me a walker, but my balance was off, and if I fell, I was screwed. The hospital had physical therapy lined up, but I'd need help in between. I figured I'd stay with Natalie for 2, maybe 3 weeks max. I brought my own money. I bought groceries, even paid for a cleaning service to help out while I was there. I didn't want to be a burden. Ryan, her husband, never liked me. He's cold, judgmental. The kind of man who doesn't say things outright, just makes you feel small with silence or looks. I tried to stay out of his way. I mostly stayed in the guest room, which was really an old office with a cot shoved in the corner. No TV. No curtains. But I didn't complain. The first week, Natalie helped a bit. She'd bring me water, warm up meals. But by the second week, she started pulling back. She said she was tired. That work was too stressful. She started snapping at me, acting like every request was too much. Once, I asked her to help me put on socks. She said, "Mom, seriously? You can't do that yourself?" Like I asked for the moon. The night everything broke, I woke up at 2 a.m. I had to go to the bathroom. The urge hit me so hard and fast I could barely think. I called out for her, softly at first, then louder. No answer. I pressed the call bell they gave me, just a little desk bell. A few minutes later, Ryan came in, looking irritated. He didn't say, "What's wrong?" or "Are you okay?" Just what? I told him I needed help getting to the bathroom, that I couldn't walk without someone to steady me. He crossed his arms and said, "I'm not wiping your ass. This isn't a nursing home." I was stunned. I told him I didn't need wiping, I just needed help getting up and across the hallway. But he already turned around and left. 5 minutes later, Natalie walked in, half asleep, hair a mess. I told her what he said. She rubbed her eyes and said, "He's not wrong, Mom. This is a lot. We're not caregivers." I asked her if she expected me to just lie there and wet myself. She didn't answer. She just sighed and walked out. So I crawled. I dragged myself off the cot and crawled on my elbows down that hallway. My hip screamed. I don't remember how long it took. 10 minutes? 20? I made it to the toilet. I collapsed on the cold floor after. I cried quietly, trying not to make a sound. I had never felt so discarded in my life. The next morning, I called someone I swore I'd never speak to again. Frank, my ex-husband. We hadn't talked in over 2 decades. He cheated on me, took the house, started a new life with a woman named Marcia, like we were just a chapter he could tear out. I hated him for a long time. But Frank always had one thing: connections. He had money, lawyers, friends in real estate, finance, politics. I knew if I told him what happened, he'd do something. He answered on the second ring. "Hello. It's me," I said. "I need your help." I told him everything. I tried not to cry, but my voice broke halfway through. When I told him about crawling to the bathroom, he went silent for a long time. Then he said, "Get out of there. I'll handle the rest." I didn't know what that meant. I thought maybe he'd send a car or book me a hotel. But what happened next hit Natalie and Ryan like a tidal wave, and it came faster than I ever imagined. Frank didn't just send a car. He sent a nurse. An actual home health nurse named Marissa showed up at the apartment around noon that day. She had paperwork, credentials, and an attitude like she dealt with jerks for a living. She took one look at the cot I'd been sleeping on and said, "Absolutely not." Ryan came home from work around 5:30. The nurse was still there, helping me settle into a proper rented hospital bed that Frank had delivered. Brand new, full mattress, adjustable head and foot. It took up half their guest office, and Ryan was livid. "What the hell is this?" he said. The nurse didn't even look up. "You want your mother-in-law crawling to the bathroom again, or you want her treated like a human being?" Ryan stormed off. Natalie came in later, arms crossed, looking embarrassed.
She didn't ask how I was.
She just said, "You went behind my back." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. She was mad because I brought attention to the truth. That night, I texted Frank and thanked him. He called me back and said, "I'm not done yet." What I didn't know then was that Frank had a lot of anger left toward Natalie, and not just for how she treated me. Turns out, she'd cut him off years ago. No birthday calls.
No visits.
No grandchild talk. She never even told him about her miscarriage 2 years back. He only found out from a cousin. "She used you like a shield," Frank said. "She blamed me, rewrote the past, and now she treats you like a dog." I'm done staying quiet. The next few days were chaos. A lawyer showed up with documents. Frank had created a living trust in my name. He transferred a portion of his real estate holdings to me directly. One property was a duplex rental in Jersey City. I didn't understand why until he explained. The duplex was Natalie and Ryan's building. They didn't own it. They'd been renting under an LLC that Frank controlled for tax reasons. Natalie had always thought they'd buy it eventually. Now it was mine. "You can evict them," Frank said. "Or raise the rent. Or just let them sweat. Your call." I didn't want to be cruel. I just wanted Natalie to understand the damage she'd done. So I called her into the room. I told her I was moving out. Marissa helped me pack. I told her I'd be staying in my own property for a while. She didn't understand what I meant until I handed her the lease termination notice. "What is this?" she asked. "That building you live in? It's mine now." She turned pale. "You're evicting me?"
No.
"I'm giving you 60 days notice. You can find somewhere else to live. Just like I'll find a way to heal." Ryan came in halfway through the conversation. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the paper. He looked like someone had punched him in the throat. They didn't cry. They didn't beg. They were too proud. But I could see the cracks forming. Frank had done more than give me power. He gave me the leverage to stop pretending I owed them anything. But the fallout was far from over. Because Natalie didn't take this quietly, and what she did next nearly ruined everything I had left. I moved into the upstairs unit of the duplex within a week. Frank had it cleaned, painted, and furnished. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. Quiet. Safe. I hired Marissa for 3 weeks to help with my recovery, and every morning I walked a little farther than the last. My hip was healing. I was healing. For the first time in years, I felt in control. But Natalie wasn't done. About 10 days after I left their apartment, I got a letter from a lawyer, hers. It accused me of using undue influence on Frank to manipulate his estate. She claimed I was exploiting his guilt and age to take control of his assets. The letter demanded a reversal of the property transfer and threatened litigation for elder abuse. It was disgusting. I called Frank. He laughed at first, but then I heard the crack in his voice. "She really thinks I'm that weak," he said. "She's willing to drag this into court instead of admitting she was wrong?" He was furious. And hurt. He hired his own legal team, top tier. The trust paperwork was ironclad. Everything had been done above board. But it still triggered an investigation. Financial records had to be pulled. Emails reviewed. A deposition scheduled. For both of us. I sat across from Natalie at that deposition in a Manhattan office building. She didn't look at me once. Her lawyer asked pointed questions. Was I promised anything if I reconciled with Frank? Was I coerced into accepting the duplex? Did I have any history of manipulating family members for financial gain? It was like she'd erased 30 years of sacrifice. 30 years of raising her, protecting her, defending her even after Frank walked out. When it was over, her lawyer leaned in and said, "You won't win. You've opened a door that doesn't close easy." But they were wrong. Because Frank wasn't done, and neither was I. The real twist came a few days later, when Frank's lawyer discovered something in the financial audit. Ryan had been cooking the books at his job, skimming from retirement accounts. Not huge sums, but enough to be illegal. Enough to ruin his license. Frank handed the info to a friend at the state board. I didn't even ask him to, but it happened fast. 2 weeks later, Ryan was fired from his firm. His license was frozen. A formal ethics complaint was filed. Natalie came banging on my door that night, sobbing. She screamed that I was destroying their lives, that I had poisoned everything, that I had ruined her marriage. I didn't scream back. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "No, Natalie. You did that. When you let me crawl." She left, crying, and I didn't stop her. But it wasn't over yet, because Frank had one more surprise, one that would change all of our lives permanently. 2 weeks after Natalie came to my door screaming, Frank invited me to lunch in Manhattan. We hadn't seen each other in person since I moved into the duplex. He picked a quiet little bistro near Central Park, something I never would have imagined him doing when we were married. Back then, he was all steakhouses and expensive watches. Now he looked older,
Softer.
He pulled my chair out, like he used to before everything fell apart. "I want to tell you something," he said after the food came. "It's about my will." I braced myself. I thought maybe he was changing it again or asking me to forgive Natalie. "I'm leaving everything to you," he said. "Not her. Not Marcia. Just you." I stared at him. "She lost that right," he said. "She turned her back on both of us. I can't undo what I did back then, but I can choose who deserves to be taken care of now." I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't fair, but a part of me deep down knew he was right.
I didn't ask for this.
I didn't beg for it. I just wanted peace. But peace, it seemed, came with a price tag. When the newel was filed, Natalie found out immediately. And that's when everything truly fell apart for her. She showed up at my door again, but not to scream this time. She looked hollow, smaller. She had lost weight.
Her clothes didn't fit right.
She sat on my couch without asking, her hands trembling. "I'm pregnant," she said. I sat down slowly across from her. "I'm not here to ask for money," she said. I don't know what to do. Ryan's going to lose everything. The case is going public. No firm will touch him again. We have debts. Student loans. Credit cards. The rent increase," she stopped. Caught herself. "Your rent increase." I stayed quiet. "I was awful to you," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm scared." That's when I felt it, the pull of motherhood. Even after everything, she was still my daughter. Still that little girl with a scraped knee crying for her mama. But I also remembered that cold tile floor. That pain. That shame. "I can't erase what you did," I said. "But I can choose how I carry it." I didn't forgive her. Not fully. But I gave her something small, 60 more days in the apartment, rent-free. I told her to use that time to find a cheaper place, get her affairs in order. After that, we'd go our separate ways.
She cried.
I didn't. Frank and I stayed in touch. Never romantic. Just two people who survived a storm and found some kind of shelter in the wreckage. He helped pay for a proper nurse when Marissa moved on. He even came to my physical therapy graduation, the day I walked unassisted for the first time. As for Ryan, last I heard, he was working at some under-the-table accounting gig for a shady construction firm. His license was gone. His reputation, too. Karma doesn't always come fast, but it shows up eventually. Natalie had the baby, my first grandchild. I sent a gift. A soft blanket. A card that said, "Every child deserves love. I hope you give it freely." I didn't go to the hospital. I couldn't. Some wounds take longer to close. But I'm walking now. I cook my own meals. I sit by the window in my duplex and sip coffee in the morning light. And when I think about crawling down that hallway, how small they made me feel, I remind myself, they tried to break me, and instead I rose. Revenge wasn't about rage. It was about reclaiming my place in the world. And I took it back, one careful, steady step at a time. The baby's name was Jordan.
A boy.
Frank told me before anyone else, almost like we were the real parents now, the ones who shared everything that mattered. Natalie didn't call. She didn't send pictures. I only knew Jordan's face from the photo Frank forwarded, quiet little thing, swaddled tight, unaware of all the damage that came before him. I thought about writing her again, maybe asking if I could visit. But every time I sat down to draft something, I remembered her standing in that hallway, crossed arms, cold voice. He's not wrong. So I waited. Months passed. My strength returned. I walked a few blocks every day. I joined a reading group at the community center. I even started seeing a grief counselor. Not for Frank, he was still around, but for the years I gave to people who would have let me rot if it made their lives easier. One morning, I got a letter. Handwritten. From Natalie. She said Ryan had left, packed a bag, and disappeared after a court hearing that didn't go his way. Said he'd start over somewhere people didn't know him. Typical. She didn't ask for money. She said she was living with a friend in Bayonne, working part-time, trying to rebuild. She enclosed a photo of Jordan, 6 months old, smiling, drooling, chubby little fists clutching a rattle. And on the back she wrote, I hope someday you'll forgive me enough to know him. That letter sat on my counter for 3 weeks. I didn't answer it. Not yet. Instead, I walked into my spare bedroom, my new office, and opened the window. The sun was strong that day, lighting up the edge of the city's skyline in the distance. I stood there for a while, hand on the sill, hips strong, heart quiet. That's the thing people don't tell you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't bring back the time you lost, or the love that was poisoned. But it stops the bleeding. And when the bleeding stops, you start to feel the weight of your own breath again. You start to remember that you matter, that your pain wasn't nothing. That crawling wasn't the end, it was the beginning of standing up. I don't know what will happen with Natalie. Maybe someday, I'll hold that boy and tell him the truth, softened, maybe, but still real. Maybe I'll tell him how I survived. And that I made damn sure no one would ever make me crawl again. I didn't reply to Natalie's letter right away. I needed to be sure I was answering as the woman I had become. Not the one who had crawled on that cold floor, not the one who spent a lifetime putting everyone else first. When I finally did write her back, I kept it short. Natalie, I'm glad Jordan is healthy. I'm sorry for everything that's fallen apart around you, but those choices weren't made by me. I can't forget what happened. I'm not ready to forgive it, but I'm willing to meet him one day on my terms. Don't come here unannounced. Don't expect things to go back to how they were. I'll decide when I'm ready to be in his life. Take care, Mom. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't soft. It was honest.
And it was mine.
I mailed it with no expectation. Maybe she'd never answer again. Maybe she'd show up crying one day. Or maybe she'd respect it. I had no control over that. But for once in my life, I was okay not having control. I had something better, peace. Frank passed 6 months later. Quietly, in his sleep. His lawyer called me the next day. I sat in his old chair in the duplex and listened as they read off the will. Everything he promised he followed through on. I was the sole beneficiary. I cried that night, not because I loved him the way I once did, but because I finally saw the whole story, how broken we'd all been, and how few chances we get to set something right. Natalie called the next week. She didn't ask for money. She didn't even mention the inheritance. She just said, I heard.
I'm sorry.
That was it. Months passed.
Seasons changed.
I saw Jordan for the first time on his first birthday. He had my eyes. He laughed when I made a silly noise. He reached for me without fear. Natalie stood in the doorway, quiet, watching. I didn't hug her. I didn't scold her. I just said, he's beautiful. And for now, that's enough. Because the real revenge? It wasn't the eviction. It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't even Ryan losing his career. It was me. Still standing, still walking, still deciding what parts of my life to let back in. It was learning that survival is its own kind of justice. And I earned every damn step.